Hey, how's it going? KOK here with a commentated POV of my P12s Sage clear. I'll be showing both Phase 1 and Phase 2, so you can skip ahead to Phase 2 if you're more into that. For the strategies we used, these are my Week 1 group strats, absolutely not party finder strats. But the commentary will mostly be over the healing of this fight, and I'll touch up on some of the more challenging areas, I suppose. But Week 1 healer gameplay is pretty much just have a bubble for every raid wide and make sure the whole party is topped up. Additionally, here are some of my major cooldowns as a Sage, if you want to use them as a reference. So at the start of the fight, I use Hollow's Panheima and Caracole, since they're basically free. The next time I'll need Hollow's and Panheima is Super Chain 1, and it'll come back up in time given that we used them in the pre-pool. For this first paradigma, I would highly recommend that groups or party finder use the Tank Invuln strat. It just reduces the amount of thinking required by the party by a ton in exchange for having to use extra mitt on the Invulning tank or the auto. A small price to pay for heavily reducing the amount of wipes on that mechanic. If your group has a very planned out mitt plan, then you won't need to GCD shield every raid wide, but cases where you're in recovery or you're not confident in your mitt plan, you can always use your GCD shield as kind of a backup in case you're worried someone is forgetting mitt. Super Chain 1, Hollow's and Panheima get used here. They come back up just in time for the damage that comes out. And since this is a 2-minute window, Phlegma is really good since you get movement along with it. Paradialogos, this is 2 large hits, very quick, so Zoe Numa is really strong here to quickly top the party back up. Sage has really low burst healing besides Zoe Numa, so in areas where you don't have much time to heal, that's the best time to use Zoe Numa. Next mechanic with the dropping platforms and tethers. I know my white mage has died recently, so they probably don't have much mana or resources to heal here. So I just spam GCD heals in an attempt to top everyone up. I don't really care about DPS optimization uptime if it means there's a chance someone in my party dies due to not being healed properly. I think that's the mentality that all healers should have when frogging or even re-clearing fights. Limit Cut, probably the hardest mechanic in the fight, along with the hardest healing in the fight. I made the mitt plan and made sure to have a ton of resources stacked for this mechanic because I didn't realize until later that the crazy damage that you can possibly take was due to a distance issue rather than a mechanic. So we did end up over-mitting based on the heal plan, but I'd rather over-mitt with room for error than just die to it due to being slightly too in for a bait. The ultimas before and after limit cut are very scary due to the amount of mitt you have to use during limit cut. So I would highly recommend using a Zoe GCD shield for whichever one has less mitt. Super Chain 2 Alpha. If your healer has any major cooldowns available for this one, it would be really beneficial for them to use it for this. Libel is great, Macrocosmos is great. Anything your co-healer can afford because you used everything in limit cut. And another Paradialogos. Numa's really good here. Zoe won't be up due to the Ultima, but be still fine with an Ixicole or some co-healer regens. Super Chain 2B. Damage of this isn't bad due to Panheima and Hollis being up once more. And as long as everyone respects the mechanics, no one should be dying to damage here. Burn a couple of Toxicons or Phlegmas for movement, and all things considered, a pretty clean kill. While this cutscene plays out, I'll just ramble about my experiences with week 1ing for the first time. Yeah, it was fun, but it was also really hard. Particularly as a healer, a shield healer, where every raid wide will kill you if you don't properly mitt. Too many times I just forget a Holos and it causes a wipe, and I feel pretty terrible each time. So it's very demanding that you make sure your mitts are on point. DPSs can afford rotation mistakes, since at the end of the day, they just lose out on like 30k DPS or something. But as a healer, you gotta make sure you're really on top of things. A lot of pressure for you to perform well, or your group just won't prog because of you. Once you get a bit more gear, healing becomes noticeably easier, so your healers are healing for a lot more each time once you get more gear. But when you're under geared, everything hurts, man. Anyways, on to phase 2. While in the first phase, Panheima and Holos were used closely together each time, there is a lot of damage in this phase, so we don't really get that luxury. So, the way I planned it out, everything was a little more spaced out to just barely survive some of the raid wides. Mitigation is a team-wide effort, so every DPS needs to be using their mitt properly, and having a mitt plan of course helps a ton with that. For this phase you want to use your Caracole pretty early, maybe 1 or 2 GCDs after the pull, so it comes up for this Gaia Ochos. But if you forget, you can always GCD shield to make up for your poor timing. GCD shielding is a really good way to have extra mitt as a backup, but when it's required in the first place to survive, it's no longer a backup. You just need to be aware of when you can afford to make mitigation mistakes and when you can't. Classical concepts, very large hits, requires a ton of mitigation. During the resolution where the beams come out, that's probably one of the harder heal checks in the fight because there's a chance both healers will be far away, like you see here. So what I do is after the damage goes out, I swing mid and drop a GCD shield plus an esunaing to make sure everyone is a little more healthy for their laser baits. Of course, you got another quick Ultima right after this, so a lot of GCD shielding required into a Crush Helm. Double Tank Buster. Tanks can invuln this or just sink it. Here we have our Gunbreaker invuln, and I'm cleansing the Paladin. One thing I'll note is that if the invuln is already going out, you do not have time for another GCD, or you won't make it in time for the cleanse. That happened to me a bit more than I would like to admit. Felt awful each time trying to greed a GCD and then the invuln just snapshotting, unfortunately. Feel like crap every time. It's a recoverable mistake to make, but not one you should be making. So I always just drop a GCD to make sure my esunaing goes off. Meteors is another really hard heal check due to the damage from the meteors into the spread damage into a Ultima. So I have a couple of resources banked for that. I use Hollows for the Ultima because it catches the next Pangenesis. And I also make sure to have a GCD shield and a esunaing during the spreads. Here, I use Panheima a bit too early. Having it up while this damage is going out would be a little more ideal, but I covered the mistake by just GCD shielding a little bit more. Normally my white mage rescues here, but since they're the one baiting slimes, I step up to do the rescue. You want to make sure you're not in the dead center for the rescue because they don't immediately go to your spot. They end up a little away from you, so you want to make sure you can drag them over the center line in time by not being dead center for the rescue. Also make sure you don't step up until the AoEs go out, or you're gonna get clipped by the slimes. Classical 2, another rough heal check. Just keep an eye out on people and try to make sure people are topped before this Ultima. I don't know what else to say. Have cooldowns ready. Our Black Mage died here. I'm not sure if it was their mistake getting hit by an AoE or because my heals didn't go out, but whatever the reason, still recoverable. As long as the tank doesn't die, I think it's fine. Caloric Theory 2, this initial hit does a lot. Palos, Caracole, GCD shield, And normally I even Panheimer here, not sure why I forgot, or if maybe I just felt like it wasn't necessary at the time. But make sure you do have a lot of things planned out as a team. This is probably one of the top 3 hardest heal checks, being spread out from caloric into a meteor explosion. Definitely requires a little bit of resource management to make sure you have a lot of things saved for it. My samurai here gets clipped by an exit flare, but as a healer, it's your job to almost always be staring at the HP bars to react in case something like that happens. So due to quick reaction of both healers, the samurai was able to survive the raid wide and ended up saving the pool, I would say. That's another reason why healing is so hard. On top of having to memorize your mitigation and do mechanics, you also have to be staring at your party members' HP bars and always ready to recover if someone takes extra damage. The victory lap, Gaia Ochos 2. It's a little bit of just a couple of raid wides back to back.
Erupted. DPS stretch. Hot window. Nova. Why? How did I not see?
We're not going to talk about what happened right there.
Fine.
We had a couple of unfortunate deaths. Double phlegma crits. Always love to see that. And a enrage cast.
So
We got it. You think we got it?
No, we don't. So what window decided?
Kill it. Just kill it.
Oh, I swift casted that glare. My swift cast glare killed a dude.
I am so fucking sorry, dude.
Nova, are you okay?
You good? Nova turbo griefing, the easiest mechanic.
Fuck am I doing, man?
I always forget that the party doesn't need to be topped up after the last ultimate because there's no more damage going out. And there we have it. A kill is a kill. Anyways, if y'all are interested, I'll make some party finder guides for this tier later on once the strats have settled. And if you got any questions, leave them below and I'll be happy to answer. Good luck on the tier. It's a banger one. In my opinion, the best event walker. So good luck out there, gamers. Get that dub.